All right, thank you, everybody. Feeling a bit under the weather. Maybe it was that, it's always that last drink that gets you, isn't it? Yeah. Anybody else feeling the same? Anybody else? Yeah. Anybody else afraid to admit that they feel the same? Okay. So, well, thank you to Exasol for having me here. I'm going to talk to you guys about kind of how to take your organization from being good at data analysis to being great at data analysis. But before we get started, let's kind of look at what's going on in the world right now. So if you just kind of search for kind of what the most needed jobs are, most needed skills, you'll see data science, data analytics are kind of the top skills that every company is looking for. And how many of you are looking for people with these skills? It should be everybody in the room, most likely. Yeah, pretty much everybody. But it's very hard to find these people. And part of the problem is that our universities don't teach the right skills. So I think there's a few reasons for this. I think largely it's because the professors actually don't have the skills to teach it. They aren't able to keep up with technologies. They're tenured, a lot of them, so they have no reason to learn the skills. And a lot of times they're funded by organizations to only teach their things. Oop. Is that better? Is that better? Okay, thank you. All right, I can hear myself just fine, so. So, I think universities are actually failing people. And then you have organizations that aren't willing to invest in their people. And, I never really kind of get this part. I don't understand why organizations decide to not invest in their people, but I'll talk about that in a bit. But before we get there, let's talk about the purpose of data analysis. So why do we do data analysis in the first place? So the first reason we would do it is to win, to have an advantage over the competition. We might do it to find patterns in our data, to seek and explore and things like that. And one of the most fun things to do in data analysis is to find the unknown unknowns, the things you didn't know about your business. And sometimes we do it to have an impact on the world. Like yesterday we heard the great talk about path. That's a way that you can use data analysis to actually have an impact. So a question for you guys, would your militaries ever send the best snipers in the world, and not Bradley Cooper, this is just a picture of him, but would they ever send the best snipers in the world, would we ever send them out without full training? Is that even conceivable that you would do that? You wouldn't, right? So why do you send your employees out to do data analysis and not have them fully prepared? Why is it any different? It shouldn't be. Well, and I think part of that is because companies are afraid to invest. So if you think about when companies are investing in their employees, one of the things they're afraid of is that their employees are going to leave, right? So they're afraid if I invest in this employee and I give them all of this training, what happens if they leave and they take this knowledge with them? But think about the opposite. What if you don't train them and they stay? What would you prefer? What's better for your organization? To train people, let them have an impact and then potentially leave? Or to not train them and they stay? It's your choice, right? And I think part of the reason is, people go into work and companies don't give them the opportunity to do the work that they love to do. So I encourage people all the time to quit their jobs. It's one of my favorite things to do. If you aren't excited to go work in the morning, then you're in the wrong job, and I encourage you to quit. Go find something that you're passionate about. And a lot of companies also don't let people pursue their passions, despite studies showing that people are 5 times more productive if they enjoy their work. So when you hire people, think about, okay, what is this person passionate about? And how can you hire and sort of tease out that passion and create roles for them to allow them to explore these things? And work should be fun, right? You should never dread going into work. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what it takes to be a good data analyst, or what are some of the characteristics of a good data analyst. Well, let's talk first about 2 things that they're not. They're not report generators. So how many of you are in organizations that have people with the title data analyst, and all these people do is create reports? How many of you? How many of you have been in those organizations? Maybe you don't have to identify your organization, maybe a previous job, right? Every company has these people. Their only job is to produce reports, yet they have a title data analyst. So I don't really think those people are data analysts. They're just report monkeys. And a good data analyst isn't a yes man or a yes woman. You shouldn't just be taking orders. You should be able to question the business and give feedback and be able to not argue. I like to argue, but you should be able to push back on the requirements. But a lot of people with this title data analyst, all they're doing is just taking an order, turning it around, and spitting it back out. That's not really very high value add. So what are some things we could do differently? Well, a good data analyst knows the basics. Things like how to design effectively, how to use color appropriately. Good data analysts know kind of basic coding. Things like SQL and Python teach you logical, structured thinking. And I think those are critical skills to just problem solving in general. So if you know basic coding, you tend to be good at problem solving. Good data analysts are good communicators. They can communicate sideways, they can communicate up, they can communicate down. And they also know basic stats. You don't have to have a PhD in statistics to be a good data analyst, but you have to be able to understand if a curve looks a certain way, why is it like that, and what does that mean? But there's a difference between being a good data analyst and being a great data analyst. So what are those characteristics? Well, first off, it's passion. Great data analysts are passionate about their work. They love doing data analysis. Great data analysts are excellent at communicating stories. In this example, we're looking at life expectancy versus fertility rate in OECD, I always have trouble saying that, OECD countries. Great data analysts are also good at taking bad visualizations and making them better. So in this example, we're looking at, this is something we did for Makeover Monday last year. It's called The Next to Die. I know it's depressing, sorry about that. It's kind of how I feel now. But there's some really big problems with this visualization, and a great data analyst will be able to pick up on these things, like the logarithmic scale to make the lines look larger, or to make the scales, or to make the lines look more impactful. You're actually misleading your audience. And are you doing that intentionally? If you are, I think that's pretty poor. And also having to go back and forth between the color legend on the left-hand side and the line on the right, and you kind of lose track of everything, right? So we posted this for Makeover Monday last year, and this is the example that Andy Cockgrave created. So has anybody seen the Iraq Bloody Toll visualization? So this is kind of a take on that. It kind of looks like blood dripping down the page. So Andy wanted to kind of take this last example and go from something good to something great. For me, I wanted to practice a long form storytelling. I use it as a way to practice. So I kind of create these dividers in the visualization to split the story up. Kind of starting with an overview of where all of the executions are occurring, mostly in Texas, surprise, surprise. And then going into a bit more detail about how people are being executed and kind of the decline of lethal injections. And also a bit about demographics and the people that are being killed. And great data analysts are also curious. They don't take the data at face value. So this is a visualization of subway crimes in New York. And all this really shows you is basically where the subways are, right? Where are the busiest subways? The busiest subways are probably going to have the most crime, right? But a great data analyst will actually add context to that and maybe look at it on a per capita basis or something like that instead. And it totally changes the story. So everything goes from kind of downtown Manhattan out to the suburbs. Really, really interesting. And sometimes you do it through just the sheer volume of information, right? Sometimes you're trying to communicate a message to your audience. So this is looking at mass shootings in America. And I kind of intentionally designed this to be really impactful, using bright reds to kind of, sort of shout at you that it's a problem. Using downward bar charts to make it look kind of sad, right? And then a calendar view to kind of show how frequently mass shootings occur in America. And great data analysts have an appetite for learning. This is just a sample of books that I think should be on every great data analyst library. I have a longer list on my blog. They're also imaginative. They can decipher messages, right? So they can find the key messages in the stories. They also tend to be very methodical. They'll often have a checklist of things that they run through. This is an example from Ben Jones's book. And he calls it the 6 principles of communicating with data. You'll kind of have, it might not be a written checklist, but you'll have a mental checklist of all of the things that you should run through. Great data analysts can also spot trends and themes. So, this is looking at the US Drought Index, right? So it's just a series of maps going from January 2010 to December 2014. And it looks like, probably from the back of the room, it's probably even better. You can almost see stripes kind of through the middle where it gets gray. Does anybody know what that is? Why would the drought be less? Anybody know? El Nino? So it's the El Nino effect. But what's really interesting is if you kind of zoom in on just California, you start to kind of spot trends and themes. So having lived in California before I moved to London, there was a massive drought for 2 or 3 years, as you could see from 2012 through 2014, massive drought. So that's because California doesn't realize that the El Nino cycle is 5 years. So it started raining again in 2015, and then suddenly everybody forgets that there was a drought. So very interesting. A lot of times people will get visualizations like this. So a table is a form of data visualization. This is measles cases in America from 1949 to 2006, I believe. We'll see in a second. And it's very simple, right? It's just a simple table. Tables are great if you need to look up specific values. But with just a few clicks, a great data analyst can turn it into something like this that tells a much more compelling story. And you can clearly see that there was a drop-off in measles because of the introduction of the measles vaccine in 1963. Or maybe you turned it into a series of small multiple maps, and you go from upper left to lower right, and you could see how the measles cases are kind of disappearing, and then they came back suddenly in California and Texas because they stopped vaccinating children. And then when those cases came back, they started vaccinating them again, and now the disease is all but gone. This is something that I built on top of Exasol. This is 400 million ozone readings in America visualized in one view. Right, so this is kind of looking at maximum readings. I didn't really know what to call this, so I called it like a tile map, heat map. Does anybody know what you would call something like this? I don't know, but it was really fun to build, and it's a really good way to use color to kind of tell the story. So the bright reds being the worst ozone levels, and sometimes, or most of the time, great data analysts are storytellers. So in this example, because I get really bored sometimes, I decided to create a visual story using Tableau Story Points feature on Arsenal's season, when it all fell apart, and why did it get better toward the end of the season. And here's an example. I'll take you quickly through an example that Pablo from the Dataschool, I can never say his last name, so I'll just call him Pablo. Everybody knows him just as Pablo. So Pablo from the Dataschool created for Tableau's IronViz competition, and this is after he'd been in training with me for only 2 months. So he starts with kind of just this, a nice big picture. It's about Bruce Springsteen. You can click on any album and kind of get details about those. And then he goes into a bit more detail about Bruce's concerts, right? So where were the most popular concerts and how many, and just kind of the broad reach of Bruce Springsteen. And then he continues to go into more detail and add layers and layers to the story. And then he wraps it up with a real, I really like this. I'm not generally a big fan of word clouds, but this one works really well because it kind of helps bring out the emotion in Bruce Springsteen's songs. Great data analysts are also excellent at iterating, so creating lots of visualizations quickly until you settle on the final story. So how can you guys get started with this sort of thing? Well, let me take you through kind of the process that we do at the Dataschool. So any training program you create isn't going to be great unless you have great teachers. And we're very fortunate at the Information Lab that every one of our core team members is a certified trainer. So this is just some of them, but I think we have 24, 25 certified trainers on our team now. We've got 3 Tableau Zen Masters and 1 Alteryx Ace. So think about the combined skills that you have in your company, and can you build a similar kind of program? We've had 47 people go through the Dataschool so far, and it's a very, one of the great things about our recruiting process is it's led to incredible diversity. We have almost a 50% ratio of women to men, or 1-to-1, I guess it's not a 50% ratio, 1-to-1 of men to women or women to men. And I think it's because of the way that we recruit. So it all starts with an applicant has to do is they have to submit something in Tableau. So why do we do that? Well, we do it because the only thing we're really looking for is passion. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care what you studied. I don't even care if you finished school. All I care about is, are you passionate? So when somebody has to go learn a new piece of software just for a job application, and they send you something, obviously they care. But think about if we just took CVs, how many more people would you apply? And how do you actually tease passion out of a CV? You can't, right? So I review every application that comes in, and I call all of them. I have Skype sessions. I make them give me a demo, all these things. It doesn't take a lot of time. And it's all just to kind of get a feel for, will this person fit into our organization, and trying to tease that passion out of the interview. So a lot of times I'll give them feedback. And I give them really, really harsh feedback. And I do that to see how they respond. That's the only reason that I do it. They don't know that. But I do it to see, because sometimes they'll write back and they'll say, no, I think it's good enough. And I was like, okay, thank you for your application. And we will not talk again. But sometimes people are like, hey, great, thanks for the feedback. I'll continue to iterate on it. We want people that are passionate and want to continue to improve. And then the final interview, okay. And then the final part of the interview, so after we invite all of the finalists back for a big day of interviews, and they each have a 30-minute time slot. And that's broken up into two 15-minute parts. We give every candidate the same data set to work with a week ahead of time, and the first 15 minutes is a demo of whatever they built. Anything they want. They can build anything they want, but it's all based on the same data set. And we do that because it makes it easier to compare people then. And then the second part of the interview is more like your typical kind of culture fit sort of interview. Is this somebody that will fit in well with our organization? But you notice the one thing we don't ask for is a CV. How many of you ask for CVs for your job applications? Why do you ask for CVs? Because that's the way your companies have always done it, right? Does a CV help you find passion in people? Not really. Does it really matter where somebody went to school? What really matters is what they've done and what they're passionate about, right? So screw the CV. Stop hiring by CVs. I think you're doing it wrong. I know you're doing it wrong, actually. And one of the other great things is, because of the network that we've built at the Information Lab, we're able to bring in guest speakers. In the first week of the Dataschool, we had Christian Chabot, who at the time was Tableau's CEO, came in and talked to them. Elisa Fink, who spoke yesterday, came in and met with them as well to talk about how Tableau markets Tableau and kind of what the Tableau community is all about. Francois Augenstadt, who's the chief product officer, comes in and actually runs a session on, okay, if you're the product manager, what would you do, right? And teaches us about how Tableau does product management. And Sophie Sparks, who unfortunately is no longer with Tableau, she left last week, she comes in and she talks about how to build your brand on Tableau Public and how to leverage that. And then after we hire them, they go through 4 months of training with me and then 3 6-month consulting engagements. During their training, the training program is about 16 weeks long, and they have a project every single week. About half of the projects are projects that I create, and the other half are projects we do for clients for free. The reason we do projects for clients is, well, it gives them real-world problems to solve, right? Rather than me just making up the projects and trying to challenge them, it teaches them things like project management and requirements management and different things like that, how to communicate with stakeholders and things. But over the 16 weeks, they probably do 30 to 40 different presentations. Is that probably about right, Nalini? Maybe not quite that many, 30-ish? So you kind of become good. We get people to kind of come out of their shells and they become very good presenters. And their work gets noticed. We've had 18 Visit of the Days, Tableau's Visit of the Day. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what that is, but basically Tableau selects a visualization from Tableau Public and highlights it. And the Dataschool's had 18 of those. And then this one by Nico Cerrone was actually chosen as Tableau's Viz of the Week. So he created this right after Edward Snowden joined Twitter. We also have 4 Tableau public ambassadors. Amanda on the upper left, that's Pablo, kind of second, spot 2, I guess. And then Ravi next to him, and we're missing one. Oh, Emily Chen as well at the top. So 4 Tableau ambassadors. And at the end of their training, they do certification in Tableau. Everybody has to do Tableau certification. Some of them also choose to do Alteryx certification. That's totally up to them. But it's just a way for our clients to get comfortable that they're actually learning the right skills. At the end of the 2-year program, there's a couple off-ramps. Some of them will get offers to join the information lab, maybe the team in the UK or the German team or the Dutch team or whoever it may be. Some of them will get offers to work for their clients. I always tell them when they're on their consulting engagements that if their client doesn't ask them to stay at the end of 6 months, then they probably didn't do a good enough job. You want them to ask you to stay, right? You want them to make you a job offer because you want to tell them no. But it's all about having fun, right? We want to recruit this really diverse audience. So this is from our company trip to Amsterdam, our Christmas party in May. So how can your organization get started? Or how can you get started? Well, I think first off, you don't want to be good at, don't approach data analysis to be good. You want to approach it to be extraordinary or to be great. So I'll take you through some tips. First off, does everybody know who this guy is? No? Leo Messi, best footballer probably ever. He scored this amazing goal in the El Clasico at the end of last season. And I mean, it just made it look absolutely effortless. But what I got to thinking about was, how many times has he probably practiced that shot? 10,000 times, 50,000 times, who knows how many? And then how many more times has he actually practiced it visually in his head? If the ball comes across, I'm going to curve it around just to think about. But that's what makes people extraordinary. It's the deliberate, intentional practice. And you can achieve that through playing. The best thing is when you kind of get immersed in the task and time just sort of disappears. So in order to play, you have to find reasons to build visualizations. So, there's data about everything. So perhaps you track table tennis results, right? And you have them in a spreadsheet. And instead of telling them kind of in a tabular format, maybe you could take it and tell a visual story with it instead. So if you're interested in table tennis, find table tennis data and visualize it, right? It makes it more fun if it's something that you're interested in. Maybe it's your personal finance. So for Makeover Monday, I gave everybody my American Express spending, which was a little bit frightening, but it was okay. It wasn't too bad. And what was really interesting is I got all these really interesting takes on how I was spending my money, including a large car purchase at the end of last year. I've been driving 30 years, and it took me 3 times to pass the UK driver's test somehow. Or maybe you want to, you too? Yeah, it's ridiculous. Or maybe you're into sports and you want to visualize things about your favorite sports team. So this is something I created because Arsenal has the worst injury record. The players are always hurt, and I wanted to kind of understand, how do they compare to the other teams that have always been in the Premier League, right? And why do they have so many more injuries? Join Makeover Monday. It's a project that Eva and I run every week. Right now there's 79 data sets out there for you, right? Already prepared, ready for analysis. And there's thousands of examples for you to look at on Twitter and on our website. Or maybe politics is your thing, and you want to you enjoy visualizing polling data. So find it. Look for different alternatives. But keep in mind that it's not an exact science. All right, thank you very much.